New numbers from Statistics Canada show Canadian exports to the U.S. are at one of the lowest proportions ever, while exports to other countries have reached a record high. Some are saying the numbers are encouraging as Canadian companies are moving their products away from the U.S. and towards other markets. Joining us now to tell us more about this and what it means to our economy is President and CEO of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Dennis Darby. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Rochelle.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now tell us about some of the numbers you've been seeing over the last few months and how some are encouraging and others maybe not so much.
Well, I guess, one way to look at it, exports to the U.S. have declined, for 4 consecutive months, and, not unexpectedly, and it's lowered the share of exports that we sell to the U.S., and that's really, as a result of the tariffs, especially steel, aluminum, and automotive. So those have had an impact on all manufacturers, across Canada, but in Manitoba as well, where, exports were down, to the U.S. about 14.5%, and that's pretty much what we've seen in other provinces. So the issue is that from a manufacturing point of view, our biggest trading partner are down quite significantly. On the other hand, we do have some increases in other countries, about 8.5% in other markets. But of course, they're not equivalent. They're all percentages, right? Because what happens is the U.S. is still about 70% of everything we export. In fact, it's probably and manufacturing is so important, especially in provinces like Manitoba, where I am here in Ontario. Mm-hmm. So it is really a mixed bag of results.
Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney has been opening up trade with other markets. Tell us how that is helping to stabilize the economy.
Well, it hasn't yet, and that's the issue. So what's really happening, we've seen an uptick in terms of exports of manufactured goods to other countries. The problem is supply chains that have existed for about 50 years across North America are very difficult to untangle or to break into new markets. So yes, there's some positive news, and we really are encouraged by seeing some, exports to non-U.S. market reaching record highs. A lot of that is to do with commodities, but in terms of manufactured goods, there is some hope. And I think another thing that is really important is the work to try to do better at trading within Canada, which is the whole point of a lot of the work done by the Prime Minister and the Premier in Manitoba and the other provinces, to really try to do more to create some supply chains within Canada. So that's another opportunity to try to build and improve and be less reliant on the U.S.
There has also been a real movement of Canadian patriotism where Canadians, Manitobans, are buying Canadian-only products. Do you think these numbers indicate it's actually working?
Well, I think we've, so recently in Manitoba, the Premier announced that, the Made in Manitoba program, which we're helping to run as CME. We also have a program like that in Ontario and a couple other provinces. And that is true. Those do tend to help people, look for Canadian supply or Canadian consumer goods. A lot of what we trade from a trade point of view are intermediate goods. So what Canada tends to produce, whether it's in Manitoba, clearly about, 10% of the GDP is from manufactured goods. Most of those are things that aren't complete, parts, ingredients, components. So it's a little bit harder to really pivot outside of things like food products and some consumer products. So it has been positive from 2 points of view. One, it helps people realize what's made in the province where they live, and that's a good thing. And it's also begun to help bring suppliers together within the provinces, because these Made in Manitoba or Made in Ontario programs really help identify potential supply chains where you normally wouldn't have thought about it. You would have thought about, well, my easiest supply chain has always been to the U.S. Maybe there's a supplier here or a supplier in another province that can work. And so we've been trying to put that network together as a trade association to help improve. It's small steps. They are the right steps. What's really important, we have to get our trade relationship with the U.S.
Which of course is hopefully going to happen by July 21st.
Well, we are hopeful and we are supportive of everything the government's doing.